In Titus 2, older women are commanded to teach what is good so they can help younger women love their husbands and children. On today's show, you'll hear from older women who will share timeless, relevant biblical wisdom and personal, profound life experiences to help answer your questions and teach what God says is good so you can be the wife and mother you were created to be. Welcome to another episode of Older Women Likewise.
Sharing the commands of God with the world is simple and joyful, and at the same time fraught with challenges. Hello, and welcome to Older Women Likewise, and this edition titled Sisters Sowing Seed, Part 1, Conversations That Start. I'm Colleen O'Steen. In the Bible, we read about thousands of people becoming Christians after just one sermon, and the Ethiopian treasurer converting after just one lesson. Those teaching don't seem to be afraid to approach strangers, that they're not tongue-tied. Well, I can't always identify with these examples, but it doesn't remove my duty to teach. Our discussion in this episode centers around our personal obligation to persevere in taking the gospel to the world. Joining me for this edition are Stephanie Massey and Julie Estes. Julie, what's going on with your life these days?
Oh, it's been busy. I don't feel like we've even started our summer yet, and it seems like their fall activities have already started with summer practices and things like that. So it's just crazy around here, but we like it that way, I guess. How about you, Colleen?
Well, I just got back from Canada. I went there with my daughter and son-in-law and one-year-old grandson. And one of the highlights of that trip, we went to Quebec, Canada, and we went to church. We met with the church on Sunday in Montreal. And so we heard everything or most of it in French. So that was fun. That was different and very rewarding to get to meet with saints in another country. How about you, Stephanie?
It's just been a crazy summer. I actually retired from the financial industry in May, and after about 20 years of working in financial industry, and I started a new business, a residential design business that I've kicked off this month. And I'm also writing a juvenile fiction book that I started last year during my cancer surgeries. So that and keeping up with my 15-year-old daughter's summer activities and getting my son ready to move off to college here in a couple of weeks. It's just crazy.
Yes. Well, a testament to what both of them are saying is that we tried to squeeze in a time. We had to get a little time when we could record these sessions because they just were so busy, both, especially Stephanie. She gave up the financial job. Now she's taken on many other things. So let's get started. What is expected of Christians today in the area of inviting unbelievers and teaching them to become disciples? Let's start with you, Julie.
I think the expectation is the same as it was in the first century. We're seeking the lost and trying to bring them to Christ. We use very different approaches sometimes than the early Christians and even from our grandparents. But the underlying task is the same. If you look at Acts 4, Peter and John are arrested after healing the lame man, and they're preaching about Jesus' resurrection. And the Jewish rulers questioned them, and his answer was, "We cannot but speak the things which we have seen and heard." And I think that's something we need to keep in mind.
And it should feel like I just cannot be quiet about it. That's what they were saying. Right. We can't, you can tell us to quit speaking, but we can't do it.
Yep. Yeah. And if we would keep that in the back of our mind, that we need to have that love for God and for his word, that we just can't help it.
What about you, Stephanie? What's expected of Christians today? You have anything to add to that?
Not a lot to add other than it does need to be priority number one, making sure that we are sharing God's word with others. And I think it has to do with getting out of our comfort zone. It's very much difficult for someone with my personality to jump out there, but I've learned a lot from actually watching my son. I've learned a lot from people, and I have pushed myself more lately to get out there and be open with people and to invite people, even if it seems like an unusual circumstance.
Yeah, we're 2,000 years down the road, but the recipe for converting souls is the same. We hear and obey and then share the gospel with others. And this can be in your network. It can be strangers you meet one time on a plane or at the restaurant, or it can mean physically carrying the gospel to a new place, or shooting it all over the world via podcasts. There are so many ways that we can fulfill this obligation and see it as our life's work. Like Julie and Stephanie were saying, it's a priority. It's the priority when it comes to serving God.
And I feel like a lot of times I do that in sort of a concentric circle way. In my home, I've still got children in my home. So I'm focusing there on them. Then I broaden that circle to the church and the kids that we teach there in the teaching program. Then you widen that out to your friends and family, widen that out to the world. And like you said, this podcast is a great way. And so for me, that's an easy way for me to think of it as it's almost like a ripple effect. You drop a rock in water and it ripples out. And I sort of think of it that way as I'm looking for opportunities.
Yeah. And I try to look for, some seeking hearts as well. I mean, we should reach out to everyone, but anytime I hear somebody say they're looking for somewhere to visit or a new congregation, or if somebody posts on social media, hey, I'm looking for a church, I always invite them. I mean, I don't know them, but I always invite them and try to make a connection so that they have someone when they get there to look for them.
And the other day I was remarking to my husband that when you have kids at home, you just have these ready-made opportunities to socialize. Even if you don't want to, they just because you have kids, there are all these ways that you have to interact with people, the parents of the kids at school or your children's friends. And so you're sitting there at the ballpark or the band competition or the swim meet. And both of you, it looks like, wow, we're so busy. And it's just like go nonstop. However, God does not tell us to stop taking your kids to the swim meet or putting them in band. I think that's his way. That's the way you meet these people, that you have all these people around you. And so don't quit doing those things if you think, oh, well, we're doing too much. Just use those opportunities to talk to the people sitting next to you. And yeah. Did somebody want to say something? Okay, so let's get into let's think about how we personally fulfill this duty. We've talked about that a little bit, but let's go to Matthew 28 and read the Great Commission. Let's get that up there. So let's read this. And Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even till the end of the age. Amen. So this is Jesus, some of the last things he's saying to his apostles and giving them their marching orders. And there are lots of things that Christians are to do, so many commands that we're supposed to follow. However, he took this time to say, this is the thing. And when he says teaching them to observe, make disciples of people, teaching them to observe all things that I've commanded you, that means indirectly that comes to us, because that's what they're teaching, is that's for us to do what he commanded them to do. Therefore, I'm doing this. So any other thoughts on, now that we've talked about this passage, and any other personal ways to fulfill this obligation, duty, or this great privilege we have? Stephanie?
I think a big thing is just unashamedly proclaiming the gospel. So a lot of times we find ourselves in difficult situations, and where things are being discussed amongst your peers, and you hear it taken out of context or used incorrectly, and that's a great opportunity to speak up and teach, but do it in a loving way, not as with a haughty attitude, and don't shy away from explaining why you're making certain choices. We were talking about with our families, and how sometimes we have to tell people we can't attend something because we have Bible class, or we have services, or we have another obligation that is expected of us from God. And, I always make a point to tell people, we're not able to come. This is why. And, it's not that I think it's usually met with positive, but most of the time, I think it's important not to be ashamed. Go ahead and just tell them. And that's one way you can reach out to people, and people will converse back with you about things like that as well.
Yes.
I think also we have to remember that it's not just the first contact teaching. Mm-hmm. When we talk about this in Bible classes, a lot of times we're really focusing only on the first conversation. The one moment that you say, hey, why don't you come worship with me? Or do you know about Jesus? But really, this verse that you read, make disciples of the nations, baptize them, teach them to observe what I've commanded you. That's multiple conversations usually. That's going to be ongoing. And so that's really a part of it. If you're going to invite someone, if they seem interested, then you need to follow up with them. If they visit one time, that's great. Follow up with them.
Yes, it's about building that relationship. When people come to visit, I always try to make a point to talk to them, find something in common with them, let them have someone they feel like they can look for the next time they visit. And another thing is I give out my personal phone number. If I chat with somebody and I am making a connection with them and I invite them, I give them my cell phone number and I say, hey, if you're going to come, anytime it's ready, just give me a call or text me and I will be out there waiting for you, so that when you walk in, you've got a familiar face there. And, it really puts a lot of them at ease. Now, most people don't take me up on it, but I have had some that have, and it's such a joy to me to see them walk in and see that smile when they see someone familiar to them.
Yeah, because that's big, especially for people who aren't used to coming to a worship assembly. They don't know anything about us, but they're interested. It does help to, at least offer them a little buffer, a friend that's going to be there when they come. That's a great idea, Stephanie. Let's look at Acts chapter 8, 4-8. Now, this is I wanted to put this scripture up here because it does show that, I think a lot of times people have this idea, oh, well, that preachers do that. Preachers teach people. They go and they teach, and they have conversations with people in the community, and then they go somewhere and they do a gospel meeting, and then they fly to some other country, and we pay them to go and do, we outsource it, but not really. That's really not really the case as far as what the scriptures say. So in Acts 8, 4-8, it says, now Saul was consenting to his death. That's talking about, this is right after the stoning of Stephen. At that time, a great persecution arose against the church, which was at Jerusalem. and they were all scattered throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. And devout men carried Stephen to his burial and made great lamentation over him. As for Saul, he made havoc of the church, entering every house. This is like people like you and me, and dragging off men and women, committing them to prison. Therefore, those who were scattered went everywhere doing what? Preaching the word. Now that took guts. If you saw people being thrown in prison for that, and then you ran away, you got kicked out of town, or you ran for your life, and you came to a new town, then, Colleen might be tempted to keep quiet, but they didn't. They went everywhere preaching the word. They couldn't keep quiet. Are there any examples? Do you glean anything from this, Julie?
Well, like you said, just the boldness of being able to withstand that and then move on and continue. And there are times for us that we have a bad experience. Well, I hate to say bad experience, but it doesn't go well when we try to talk to someone, introduce them to the gospel. They reject it or reject us. And I think we just need to take this as an example of get up, move on, find a new area to preach, find a new outlet to keep spreading the gospel.
Stephanie?
Yeah, and it teaches us that we're expected, well, as Christians, we should have a desire, regardless of our circumstance, to share the word.
Yeah, and to comment on what Julie was saying, you can have an uncomfortable situation, or your invitation was not taken well, or something that made you go, oh, just feel kind of stunned by that. And the temptation would be to say, okay, well, I'm not good at this. I'm not going to do this anymore. But you can't do that. And there are also cases, if you're inviting people daily, at the grocery store or wherever, the mailman or whoever, sometimes there will be, especially when you're first starting, you do have to kind of analyze how you're approaching people, what you're saying. And so if there is some, maybe you said the wrong thing, or you said it in a way and you think back, I was kind of pushy about that, or I shouldn't have interrupted. He was working, I shouldn't have interrupted him, or just things, kind of work on your delivery and don't let that stop you. There will be times when you just need to kind of get better at what you're doing, and it's just like, when you played a sport or you played an instrument or whatever, the first time you hit a clinker or you struck out playing softball, you probably didn't quit. Okay, we got to get back up and analyze what I did wrong, and let's move on. So that's a great idea.
Well, and maybe they treated you poorly because they were having a bad day. They were off kilter, and we can't let that affect us the way that they respond.
Yes. And sometimes when you have these spontaneous conversations with people, I think occasionally I've thought that they knew more than they did. And so I have to be careful about that until I know them well and really understand what they're thinking. Even though they seem receptive, that is one thing that I've found. Just be careful. Just because people say they know all about the Bible and they're big Bible students, it may not be really the case. So to get into the nitty-gritties right away might be maybe just caution. I would just say caution about that. But you're right. There are all these conversations along the way. A lot of times, the cold calls I make, I don't really get a follow-up. I do give them a card so they know where to go. But then, for people that or you're going to see again, I'll say like the mailman, mail lady, those are various conversations that you're going to have over time. So good point on that. Here's another passage I just wanted to throw up. I didn't give this to Isla to put up there, but this is another place where, if you don't really feel like you want to proclaim it, we're commanded to in 1 Peter 2 and verse 9, it says, "But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people." Now listen to this, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. I haven't thought about that part of the verse. I've thought about the royal priesthood part a lot, but the point is that you may proclaim the praises of God. So we need to be looking for opportunities to do this. Well, let's move to a discussion of Jesus' encounter with the Samaritan woman at the well in Sychar in John 4. In a nutshell, Jesus is alone taking a break at the well. The Samaritan woman comes to draw water. And of course, if you have not read this, you're not familiar with it. John 4 is where you can find this. She is half Jew, half Gentile, and has a confused view of God's commands. But she's interested when Jesus brings up spiritual topics. I love this. This is a great chapter of the Bible to read and reread and really think about when you're driving, mull over in your mind when you're mowing the yard, you're doing mindless labor, because for me, at least, this is the most like an encounter we might have in the 21st century America. Some of them to me are not, we don't really have some of the situations that we see in the book of Acts, but this is like 21st century America to me. All three of us have experience approaching unbelievers with the good news of Christ. Stephanie, based on your experience with Bible study, your experience and Bible study, cite some key learning points you've gained from the woman at the well to bolster your understanding of how to invite and teach. How does that kind of get you going?
So I think one of the first things is do things that others see as unusual behavior. Don't be afraid to do the things that others think are strange. So John 4:9 says, the Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink since I'm a Samaritan woman?" That was unheard of, right? Approach the person that no one else wants to be associated with. Stop and pray with someone who's going through a hard time rather than just saying, "Oh, I'm so sorry about that," or "I'll pray for you." Just stop and do it. Have a positive attitude, even when you're going through a difficult situation, but I think doing things that people see as unusual is something I learned. Consider unusual behavior.
Yeah, have some guts. Mm-hmm. Get out of the seventh grader peer pressure, worry mindset. And yes, and that also takes thinking outside the box as well beforehand, being a person that thinks of it in a different way. That's how products are sold. That's how marketing is successful, because people spend a lot of time thinking about it. So we can do that too. Julie, do you have any answers to this particular question?
Yeah. So I've heard it preached many times, you probably have too, that Jesus started this dialogue in a place that she understood, in a subtopic, a topic that she understood, water, the need for water. And so I think we can use that. We can start with something they are familiar with and expand from there. And that way they're engaged in the conversation from the very beginning. Perhaps it makes it, in a way, something more, I don't want to say more palatable, but something that they are more accustomed to talking to, sort of like being in their vernacular of things. And then expand from there so that they have somewhere to start and they can join the conversation with you and not just be me talking to them. It can be more of a back and forth because of their knowledge of whatever the topic is too.
Yes, I'll have to tell a little story about Julie. I taught a class a few years ago, and in the class we played a game. It was on how to approach people, how to invite people, and that's what we talked for this 6 week class. And one of the games we played was Who Wants to Be Rejected. So everybody had to. We did a little role playing thing, and I would come to everybody would get their turn. And then I would come to the door like I would be delivering a package or something, pretend that. And then they would answer the door, and they would have to come up with a way to invite me to church or talk about Bible study or talk about God. And so they all had to get used to that. And then, I would reject them and they would just get used to it, not worry about it. But so when it was Julie's turn, I came and I pretended I was delivering a pizza. And I don't think that I can say it as well as she did, but just impromptu, I said, "Oh, here's your pizza." And she said something like, have you ever heard about the bread of life? So she took pizza and talked about bread and did just what she's talking about here. Do you remember that, Julie?
Oh, I do. Now that you mentioned it, I can't believe you remember that. Yeah. Now that you brought it up, I hadn't thought about that in a long time.
Yeah,
That was fun. It was a really good exercise that you did because it made people stop and think. You get told to do that, but when you have to act it out, and especially when you're able to act it out in a comfortable situation with people where it's okay to feel silly about it, I thought that was a great activity you did.
Yeah, and everybody's uncomfortable. Nobody just really wants to get rejected. They know they're going to get rejected, but just go ahead and do it. It's like striking out in softball. You get used to it after a while. The first time it's terrible, but you do it enough, you play enough softball, striking out's not such a bad thing. You get used to it. So here's one thing, and chime in if you want to discuss any of these. Jesus was always in teaching mode. He was always thinking about he was always about his Father's business. And so he wanted a glass of water, but he didn't let that occupy his mind fully. He used that to bring up a spiritual topic and to start talking to her. So a lot of times with myself, I'm so busy doing this stuff that I don't remember, I could have invited that person or this person. We talked about this and I should have said, why don't you come to Bible study with me tonight? Or so I try to always be looking for a way, always in teaching mode or inviting mode. If you're somebody who sells stuff, that the way you're successful is that you think about your product all the time and you're invested in your product and because you think it's the best product. You're always ready to talk about it. You probably bore some people because you like to talk about it so much. So Jesus was always in teaching mode. He used the available situation to bring up a spiritual prompt, as Julie said. And the Samaritan woman was a little bit like me. She was a little bit like me. She wasn't asking for enlightenment, but surprisingly, she was intrigued by it. And this reminds me of a tall, handsome guy that I had been on a date with one time, asked me for the second date and said, "I want to take you to church for this date." And so this guy was not particularly, he's kind of shy. He's not a really verbal person who just likes to talk and is real bold. But he had the guts to say to this girl he wanted to go out with a second time, I want to take you to church. And but one thing led to another. And here I am decades later, we're married. We have 3 kids and grandchildren. That's just that woman at the well always has a special place in my heart because she was ignorant, but interested. And if somebody gave her the right information, she'd say, these people are different. So that's another one. Any more on that one?
I think that the big thing is, go ahead. I was going to say, Jesus doesn't see her as a Samaritan. He sees her as a soul with an eternal destination instead of just a person. And I think if we get in the habit of seeing people as souls with eternal destinations when we are looking around, it gives you a totally different perspective of how important it is for us to make those connections and invite people and try to build those relationships to be able to teach, because they are souls with eternal destinations, not just busy people running around doing a job.
Good point. That is true. And to think what could happen to them on the day of judgment. Julie, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that the other craft that Jesus had was to take what someone said or a question they asked. In this case, she asked about where to worship, and to redirect that into a more profitable conversation. She had a question, and she asked that right after she said she perceived him to be a prophet. So she recognized, his importance and asked him a difficult question. But that wasn't what he wanted or needed to talk to her about. So he was able to take that and just talk right over. If we can learn that craft of taking what they say and then using it to move over into something that's maybe more important than what they brought up, or answer their question and then segue into something more important. I just think that is a really useful thing that he does.
That is. And the only way to do that is to get experience and make mistakes and keep on and keep doing it and be very familiar with scripture. If you look at someone and they seem to be able to do just what Julie is describing and just what Stephanie is describing, they didn't start out being great at that. They said, okay, well, I'll give it a try. And then they maybe failed or they weren't as good. They just kept working at it. It's like anything we do, we have to get experience. And then you get to where you really are good at fielding questions and making connections, especially customizing it for the person. Very good. Let's talk quickly. The woman at the well could just as fittingly be called the apostles at the grocery, because remember what they were doing. They were off doing logistical stuff. They were getting food, and they come back. So Jesus and the woman are they're busy working out God's plan, and the apostles are just, they don't know what's going on. They're like, you need to eat. Any comments about it? Do either of you have, we'll start with Stephanie. Do you have any ideas about this? How the contrast between Jesus and the woman, and then the apostles who were supposed to have all this information and have been with Jesus for so long? How could they have come up kind of empty-handed here?
Yeah, the apostles had gone to take care of their physical needs, their food, the things that physically they need, and they marveled that Jesus was talking to her. But Jesus was not about our physical needs. He was about her spiritual needs. And so, they had totally different mindsets. Even though the apostles had seen everything, they had heard everything, they knew who Jesus was. But every time it never ceases to surprise me, as humans, we tend to forget the last big thing that God did for us. And just like they have, they've seen all the miracles and all the things, but they were more at that moment, they were more worried about physical needs. And Jesus has never been worried about his physical needs. He's always been about his Father's business.
Julie?
I think there's a good comparison between this and Mary and Martha, where Martha was busy hosting the crowd and Mary was sitting at Jesus' feet. And so in Luke 10, they both had good intentions. In Luke 10, verse 42, Jesus says, one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen the good part, which is not to be taken away from her. So it's not that it was a bad thing, what she was doing or what the apostles were doing. It was just the less important thing.
Yes. And if you just have to work constantly to make God's priorities your priorities, and then all the other stuff has to shrink back. Even if it is, getting clean clothes on your kids, getting them bathed and fed and off to school, or keep, all these things that we do, that's a lot, especially if you have children or people that are sick or need special care. It is too easy to get focused on that and become a machine when it comes to taking care of them, and then kind of forget that that's not really your Father's business. Let's look at John 4, 31 through 35. I'm going to read that here in a minute. And this is kind of the punctuation. This is the end of the whole that exchange. In the meantime, his disciples urged him, saying, "Rabbi, eat." But he said to them, "I have food to eat of which you do not know." Therefore, the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him anything to eat? It's just clueless. Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work. Do you not say there are still 4 months and then comes the harvest? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look at the fields, for they are already white for harvest. To say that my food is to do God's will, that's a lot. And maybe I can do that at times and on certain days, but I falter, and I'm busy with things that I need to do to continue with this life here on earth. So that's a major point that he makes. He's like, you've got to, God's gospel, the gospel of Jesus Christ needs to be the gospel, Colleen's gospel too. The Apostle Paul in Romans 16 says, the preaching of my gospel through my gospel and the preaching of Jesus Christ. He calls it his gospel. So that's what Jesus is saying here. Julie, do you have any comments on this section?
Yeah, well, I think about the food is to do the will of him who sent me. In my kids' science class this year, we were studying energy and food becoming energy, and then using your body to then transfer that energy. It's all that transfer of energy, if anyone's a science buff. And all that starts with, of course, food growing and then us taking in that food. And so this really, his food, his energy is to do the will of him who sent him.
Yes. Just like you feel good when you eat something you really like, or that's got something in it that really gets you going. It's like you want more.
And it's what makes you able to push forward and continue in what you're doing.
Yes. I get that from, especially when I teach someone who really is going, wow, I've never read this before, or maybe you're teaching some children and they're asking all kinds of questions, and they're like, well, what about me? How do I need to be baptized? Or, and they're asking things that produces a lot of energy for me. And you can't get that unless you just jump in and you start doing this work. To sit back and go, well, I'm going to wait till I feel good about it. That's probably not going to work. The day will probably never come. But it feeds, just like Julie said, you feed on this like you feed on, a steak or whatever you eat. Stephanie.
I very much agree. Yeah, it does feed us. And, it just when you get fed like that, it's just a reminder of how important it is, not only to you and to others, because it feeds them as well. The excitement that they get from it as well is it's not just a one-sided thing. They get excited, you get excited, and then you're kind of up for the rest of the day. So it's not just over and done and you move on. Like when you eat lunch, okay, I ate lunch, that was good, and I'm moving on. When you are fed with God's word and you're sharing that with others, it keeps you sustained for much longer than physical needs.
And often one seed produces multiple, enough to feed many.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good point. And, even if you don't get a great reception, the kids are all just sitting there staring at you, or the person that you studied with, kind of gave you pushback or whatever. There's a point where it energizes you anyway. Just to spread the word, to sow the seed is still very energizing, and it really perks me up. Now I do better on the days that the people are more receptive and I feel like I'm doing more good, but the ability to rise above it when that doesn't happen is also very, very, very important for us, and it's a very valuable skill. What about thinking about this passage with the apostles and food, and Jesus with his father's doing the will of his father? How does this help you prioritize your daily activities and your secular work, things that we know you have to do. How does this help you in any way? Does this inform that, Julie?
Well, it does because, well, like you said, making it a state of mind, something that's just always on your plate, always in the back of your mind, everywhere you go, everything you do. You want to do things to the best of your ability, even if it's completely secular or just for fun. You want to do things to the best of your ability. And that's a part of teaching the gospel. We want to do that to the best of our ability. So we keep these things in our mind that we can share the gospel at any activity, in any secular place that we are. And we're going to do that to the best of our ability.
Yeah, and I think it's important to make sure we start our day praying for opportunities and praying for confidence and for the desire and ability to go ahead and step out there and speak to somebody and when the opportunity comes or make the opportunity, but to pray about it, to pray about our work in that and how, if we're anxious about it, pray about it. You know, I'm anxious about this. I really want to. I know I need to. I know I'm supposed to, and I really want to, God, but help me. Help me in my unbelief. Help me in my fears. Help me when I struggle. And to know that you laid that before God and that he wants this for you as well. And he's going to be there to help you. You know, I think that is a great comfort and something to keep at the very first thing you do every day is to know that I want to do this. This is the kind of work I want to do. I want to be pleasing to God, but help me.
Yeah, I look at this and I try to put myself in the apostles' shoes. He chides them for focusing on bread and fish instead of what he sees as the real food and what truly sustains him. So, like, think of how embarrassed you would be. I try to make myself feel embarrassed like they would. Here's this woman who's showing them up, basically, and it's a Samaritan woman as well. So I don't want to be chided. So that's kind of like I don't want to be seen as like childish in the face of heady things of God. So that's one thing that they had to endure, like is kind of, making fun of them for not being any further along than they were and for focusing and being too worried about food. So that helps me. I make myself feel a little embarrassed, if I don't do the right thing, and that helps me. When I read that, and it helps me to think about how they must have felt and think I don't want to be in that boat. I don't want to be. I have the privilege of learning from them, and so I don't want to let that go. Also, the woman and the apostles, but all of them were given some stark observations by Jesus, and they were shown where they needed to grow. So if I don't feel the joy I'm supposed to feel, then this may work. I don't know that this works for everybody, but if you don't feel it, if you say, I just don't feel like doing it, I don't feel like talking to people, I'm backward, I don't feel like it. Well, start acting like you do feel that joy. And hopefully, eventually, that joy will manifest itself. So that would be another thing I glean. And here's something. Do it now. She didn't go, okay, well, let me think about this. I feel a little funny going and talking to the men of Sychar. They'll probably tell me to go away because I'm a woman. They'll think I'm nuts. Let me think about it. And she didn't put it off, did she? She went straight. She ran. And she left her water pot. She didn't even take that with her. And so do it now. Don't put it off. Jesus talked to the woman right away. He didn't say, well, let me see what she's about. No, and then the woman took the news to the town right away. She didn't put it off. And many were saved. Of all these things I've thrown out here, do either of you have any ideas about as we wrap up this discussion?
I liked what you said about choosing to go. You see people's bumper stickers, choose joy. And it is true. You can choose, if you start out with a bad day, you can choose to let that go and have a joyful day. And I think it's the same thing as what you're saying. You can choose to jump in there, and it might scare me, but I can choose to do this.
Stephanie?
I agree. Yeah, it's a choice. I mean, I always tell my kids it's a no unless you try, unless you ask. It's always going to be a no unless you ask. And so you have to choose to ask and choose to put yourself out there. And so, yeah, it's always a choice.
What about the doing it now? Do either of you have how do you make yourself do it now when it's a little, uncomfortable maybe?
Yeah, I think when you, for me, I do that with most things. Just get it over with. Just a get it over with mindset. Let's just do it now, get it over with. Anything that I dread, I do it first. Any tasks that I have for the day, I try to put those earlier in the day instead of push them at the end, because if I put them at the end, I'm less likely to push them off to some other time. But if there's something that's got to be done during a day, I just try to tackle that first. If it's something I'm not looking forward to, get it over with. Not that we should be getting this over with, but just do it. Do the hard things. Push yourself. Do it now. Don't say I'll do it if they come back to me. If when the server leaves, if they come back, then that's when I'll do it. Or when I see the mailman next time, that I'm going to do it then. No, just when you're thinking of, do it now. Just do it now. Don't convince yourself to wait and do it later.
Julie, any other ideas as we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, I put things on my calendar. That is, if it's not on my calendar, it often doesn't happen, or a to-do list. And so, that's big. If I'm going to do it now and I'm going to kind of just jump into something that maybe I'm not comfortable with, if it's on my calendar and then I see it and it's like, well, it's time for that. When my kids were little, I would always tell them, oh, it's time to do this. And I wouldn't tell them, we have to get this done sometime today. I would say, it's time now. And they didn't question me when they were young, because, okay, mom says it's time. This is when we do it. And now is the time.
Yeah. And that calendar is going, you better do it. Okay. Well, a lot of good, really great practical ideas about how to carry out the Great Commission. So Sisters Sowing Seed, conversations that start. Let's everyone, mull over what we've talked about. Think about it today. Maybe spend 5 minutes, just, maybe when you're driving or when you're doing something else, or just sitting still in a quiet place. Think about it. Think about what you want to do next in your walk with God when it comes to sharing the gospel with others. And we'll see you next time.